This is Black Market Leadership, the underground resource for disruptors and status quo breakers.
Okay, so go back to your company, Microfame Media. Who comes to you? Like, what's the avatar? What's the kind of person or company that comes to you looking to get hype support?
It's gotten very specific over the last 3 years. So at one time we dealt with all kinds of companies, as people will do when they start a business. But we've sort of solidified in two directions, and it's really grown our business. So on the sort of agency consulting end, which is sort of the big ticket stuff we do, a lot of our clients recently, not all, but are venture funded startups, not just startups, but venture funded startups. And the reason is, I didn't realize this, but the word hype is used a lot in the Silicon Valley venture funded startup world, because what a lot of people talk about is, we have this great product, but we need to hype it up as well as WeWork did, even if they think their product is better. And you hear that word a lot. And so when my book came out, you had all these venture funded startups who said, we need this guy and we need his company. Because what they do is they typically start by hiring a branding agency, and branding agencies can be great, but they're just using their imaginations. They're saying, oh, these are the colors that are good. This is the verbiage that is good, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas what we do is we say, okay, what result are you trying to get in the marketplace? What kind of perception, what kind of energy are you trying to build? That sort of thing. And then we go out there and, using the hype principles, these psychological principles that we've become experts at, we conduct experiments. And then when we nail the experiment, the result, when we say this is the thing that works, we document it so that it can be used throughout the organization. So basically, we play the role that a branding company plays, but we don't just do it from our imaginations. We do it based on these principles and experiments. So that's one. Also, I love working with those companies because the great thing about a venture funded startup is I admire anyone who starts a business, but the truth of the matter is a lot of people who start businesses, there are a lot of holes in the product a lot of times until they've developed it. And it's hard to promote something that isn't quite there yet. Whereas if someone has raised money, if someone has put a business plan together that has gotten people to sign checks and say, we believe in this enough that we're going to invest in a team for you, they have something. You know what I mean? They're also risk takers. They're smart. Not that other people aren't smart, but they make really good critical decisions and that sort of thing. So those are great. And then on the complete other side, where our business has gone is I never wanted to stop helping companies and people who don't have the opportunity. So we started really building out products and things like that. So we have a pretty engaged email list. We give book recommendations and write some funny stuff to that list. And those people are fans of ours. And every so often we offer templates and blueprints and group programs and video courses all around the hype methodology. And that's been wonderful too, because then we can help people who don't have, the sizable budgets that it takes to invest in an agency. And we allow that, we help them kind of make that happen at their own pace. So those have been the two directions where we've been going lately.
I love that. I really love that, especially the Silicon Valley, venture, I should say, new ventures. My first big client was LifeLock. It was about a year after the CEO went on CNN, and he pulled out his social security number and gave it on air. And I love those kind of companies, the rapid growth, you might say.
Great.
Because they like risk taking. That's me. That's my DNA. I want to
smart risk taking, right? Smart risk taking. I mean, there are a lot of risk. I mean, I know companies. I mean, a client that's not great for us is somebody who had a really brass tacks company and did well in that, and then they decide, oh, I'm going to start a tech company that's in some sexy industry, but they have no knowledge of that company. They're funding it with the profits from their other company. So they're taking risks that maybe they didn't do their homework before they took those risks. And they can sometimes be closed-minded to feedback, that, things like that. Whereas somebody who said, okay, we're going to really assess the right kind of risks to take. I like that.
Do you find that you work when you work with these? I'm assuming you're working with founders, like the first generation of the executives, people who really made the company rise. Would that be fair to say it's usually the first generation?
Largely, I guess, actually, there's a third kind of work that we do too. We do workshops. So and I like doing those. So and I bring this up for a reason. There's a company called Locked In, in Texas. They're all over the country, but I think they were founded in Texas, and they're a privately held company, but the founder, they're second generation family company, but they're the largest privately held insurance company in the country. But all of their agents are sort of responsible for their own book of business, and they have a structure where they're responsible for people underneath them. So they had me come out for a week and do a series of workshops teaching all of their people how to generate attention and that sort of thing. So that was different. But typically these sort of venture funded startups are I'm working with the people who started the company.
I just asked because I remember because LifeLock at the time, I was very fortunate to work with the first generation. And the second generation and the third generation comes, and the third generation is usually pedigrees, calculated risk. And for, in my mind, this might be my bias, but in my mind, some of these third generations, the word hype would be a pejorative. No, we're not taking
100%. Yeah. I mean, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. Do you mean family businesses, third generation?
No. I mean like bringing executives with the Ivy League pedigrees who memorize Michael Porter.
I would say that that's often the case. I mean, I don't know. I agree. I will say though, there's a movement away from that. I have a friend named Greg Larkin, and he has this shout out to. He has an organization called Punks and Pinstripes.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, really cool. And we became really fast friends, but he was a fan of my book, and he described it as bad brains in a sea of Grateful Dead or something like that of business. It was very cool. But so we became fast friends. But what he basically does is he works with people who are corporate executives, but who have what he calls an intrapreneur mindset. They have like a risk-taking mindset within the company. And he makes 2 points about that. One is that those people will always have, I forget the word he uses, but it's like almost like roadblockers, people who are going to put up obstructionists. That's what he says.
Yes.
He also says they're essential. And what he also makes the point is that there's a misconception that every new founder is like a Zuckerberg, but the vast majority of founders of new businesses that are really successful are people who worked in that corporate environment and had enough. They couldn't get they had to go on their own to make that next level thing happen. So I think there's a lot of talk right now. I think a lot of big corporations are investing in not being the next Kodak or Blockbuster. Do you know what I mean? I think that terrifies them.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you scale, it's hard to not, there's a reason that there are MBAs, because when you're a 10-person company, the founder just walks next door or does a Slack thing and says, do this thing, or whatever. Whereas if you're a 10,000 person company, you need structure or the thing falls apart. But with structure comes rigidity. So it's just a challenging thing. So there are people out there working on that problem.
Let's see. Okay, I promised you an hour. We got 15 minutes. I'm always ex-military. I'm always on time and I always keep my word. Okay, yeah. So I want to shift this conversation. I want to shift it from hype. By the way, again, for the audience, the Hype Handbook, readable, fascinating, interesting. Love my God, you did so much research. You have so many examples. Oh,
I did a lot of research.
Okay. All right. So now we live in the age where you can write your own book. You can publish on Amazon. You, though, went with McGraw-Hill. You got published. And by the way, congratulations on getting published. I think that's all stat. 3 people out of 1,000 get that opportunity.
Thanks. Yeah, it felt good. I mean, it was, yeah.
Okay. So was it worth it? Was it worth getting published by a big publisher?
Yeah, it was very worth it on a few levels for me, I sometimes go to conference. First of all, there's just the fact that I'm a writer and it was a dream, blah, 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 but that's neither here nor there, But there's a couple of reasons it's worth it. One, there can be an advance available, which can be helpful. but that's also rather neither here nor there. But that can buy you some time in terms of, because most nonfiction books, you don't write the whole book. You write a proposal and you sell it on the proposal. That's a misconception that you write the whole book. That's more for fiction. So if you write the proposal and get an advance, that can buy you time to write the book, you know? But I think more importantly, yeah, you can self-publish, but the fact of the matter is everyone knows that you can self-publish. And as a result, there's a glut of really bad books out there. So, you know, I'll go to conferences, and God bless anyone who sits down and writes 250 pages, but people will hand me a mountain of their new book. And it's, you know, leadership strategies from the 21st century, growth, you know, money, processes and procedures, taxation without representation. I mean, you know, these like very, you know, generic books. And like you read them and they're more bullet points than even words, you know, and you're just kind of like, I see what's going on here. Like, so when I want to gain access, you know, whether it's to a speaking gig, which is invaluable for us for teaching people and then eventually turning those people into clients, when it's something like this, when it's the fact that I'm in bookstores, I have distribution and people buy the book in bookstores and then call me up. It just comes with a level of credibility that turns into dollars and cents. It's not just a feel-good thing. I mean, people take you much, much more seriously as a professional. The other thing is you have an editorial team. I mean, my editor was Danya Dickerson, and she made the book better. You know, she doesn't rewrite it for you, obviously, but she gave comments that were invaluable. The book would have been nowhere near as good without her help. She does that very professionally with very high-level writers. So that's another thing. I do think it's true that they expect you to do a lot of the marketing on your own, which is different than it was in the past. So you might think to yourself, why don't I keep all the royalties? But are you really going to do that? I mean, are you going to call every Barnes and Noble in the country and get it there? And if you do, are they going to say yes? Are you going to, you know, do you really have the sophistication to be able to sell these books and get them in front of the right people? So I don't know. I mean, it just depends. But for me, it made all the difference.
What was the biggest surprise in working with a publisher and writing and going back and forth? What's the one thing that really, was there anything that really shocked you?
No. I mean,
Like,
weirdly enough, I mean, I had published a book before when I was 18 and I had been through the process, and then I had a long gap in between, but it was this weird, humorous driver's manual that sold about 14 copies. I mean, I don't know how many copies it sold, but not well, but it was published.
It's great.
By Macmillan. But I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of writers, you know, I just went out of my way to cultivate those friendships, not in like a sinister kind of way, but I like writers, you know, so I have a lot of writer friends, and I've just heard it all, you know, like people not, you know, everything from getting really big marketing pushes to not being able to get a marketer on the line. I mean, just I've heard it all. I guess the one thing I was pleasantly surprised about is how much I like the editorial process. I mean, I really like that feeling of handing in a manuscript that you're pretty proud of, but then going through this process where a professional sort of prods you, cajoles you, but in a good way, like where an editor massages, prods, suggests, cajoles. You know, I can tell they try not to hurt your ego while at the same time giving you the right advice, and then taking a manuscript that you already thought was good and you end up recrafting a lot of it. But like, it turns, if you're open to the process, it was amazing how that was really part of the process. You know, it wasn't like something to get defensive about. I really enjoyed it. I thought it would be a pain in the neck after doing all of that, having to go back and wrangle with an editor, but never do they say to you, do this. You know what I mean? Like, they never say that. They say, look, I mean, I'll give you an example that comes to mind right now. And this isn't the typical thing. Like, sometimes it was like really, you know, not overwhelming. Sometimes it was stuff like, we need more actionable tips here or whatever. But at one point I talk about the Nation of Islam because the Nation of Islam were very good. They went from like a base, one guy in Paradise, Detroit, to like a massive organization that Muhammad Ali was in and all these people. But they're not Islam at all. The guy who started it was this guy, Wallace Fard, who was a con artist and made up a religion. It was about, there's a scientist on a planet named Yaqub who created white people to overthrow, like it's not Islam, But I didn't make that distinction clear in the book just because I didn't. I mean, I just was writing, and the editor said, hey, your decision, but you might want to make that distinction clear because when people see this, that could open you up to misunderstanding. If you really wanted to make that point, maybe we'll stand behind you. But if you don't have a bone to pick with the religion of Islam, that might be something that you clear up. And I would have never thought about that. I thought that was clear. It was a blind spot to me. You know what I mean? So I rewrote it and it saved me tons of trouble. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a very small suggestion, but just things like that. I mean, it just talking it out with a professional who sees things that you don't.
What was your 12 lessons, right? 12 lessons. What was your original concept? Did you have 12? Do you have 4 or 5? Did it expand? Did it grow as you're writing?
Yeah, I guess the way I saw it was, I knew I wanted it to have a set number of principles, but I didn't know how many. And I kind of stole my research process from Ryan Holiday, who stole it from Robert Greene.
Really?
Both of whom I'm fond of. And what Robert Greene taught Ryan Holiday was, they do a lot of reading and a lot of interviewing and a lot of this. And when they read, they mark up what they're reading, and then they let the book sit for a while, and then they go back and make note cards on the notes that worked. And then as time goes on, they sort the stuff into categories. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And as a result, themes start to show up. So I started to do that. I would read tons of biographies, psychology books. I would interview some people. I would look at academic papers, and I would mark them up, and then I would let it sit, and I would go back and put all the stuff on note cards, their idea. And as it showed up, it was really a cool thing because you would just see the same themes repeat over and over again, whether it was, I don't know, Charles Manson, who's the worst person in the world, or Warren Buffett, who's a pretty decent person, or Martin Luther King, who's a pretty great person, you would see the same underlying themes repeat over and over. And it turned out to be 12. I mean, that was what sort of bubbled up. There were 12 themes.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. What's something, we're getting close to the end of this interview. This has been so much fun. I mean, I got to tell you, it's been inspirational.
It was a great interview.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. I feel like as I'm writing, I think I told you I have 100,000 words. I use a lot of military terminology. I'm in what they call the fog of war. I'm sure you're. Yeah. All you know is you do your best. You're like, I have no clue if it's going to sell one copy, but my God, I'm doing my best. And so,
writing is fun, but it's also a nightmare. Like, I mean, it's like we have to do it, but if you're a writer, but it's a lesson in, it's like an exercise in self-flagellation, the entire time. Yeah.
So you said you're a reader. I'm just curious, what's the last good book you read?
It's funny because I read all kinds of stuff. I mean, I know these people who just read like business books, you know what I mean? And I think that's a mistake, but I've read them all. But what was a really inspirational book for me? And you talked a little bit about the It's Never Too Late stuff. It was called Finding Oz. It was about L. Frank Baum, the guy who wrote Wizard of Oz. And what was really cool was that book, we think of the movie, but the book came out in 1900. It turned out to be this big series, and it was a gigantic success. It was actually the first American children's literature success.
Wow.
And probably. And he really struggled to find his way. He was a sensitive kind of guy, which I kind of am. He tried being a theater person, sort of the way I tried being a rock star, and he had some success, but he couldn't make a living at it. Then he really went hardcore into business. So he sold oil, then went out to the Midwest to do homesteading and started a retail store. And he had like mild successes all along the way, but never had his big explosive break. And then he drew on all that experience to create the Wizard of Oz and at like 43 or something, and became, a giant. And it inspired me because I was a bit of a late bloomer, as you read behind the lines and figured out. I was always doing cool stuff that made just enough money, or I was settling and doing stuff I thought I needed to do to support my family, but wasn't following my bliss, as they talk a lot in this book, Joseph Campbell. And it wasn't until I sort of found a way to merge that at a relatively advanced age in a professional way that things turned around for me. So that book was really inspiring and cool. And I think it was an antidote to a lot of this like rah-rah, like crush the competition, Peter Thiel kind of stuff that's out there right now. I don't know. I recommend it. I think the guy's name was Evan I. Schwartz. I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I think it was something like that.
That sounds great. I love it. I really love it. And I really respect the fact that you can tell you're continually growing and developing. And I love this. So before we leave, is there another book? Are you working on another one? It's a hype part 2, super hype.
Well, I'm doing a couple of things. I'm really neck deep in that product creation. That was originally going to be like a workbook version of the hype handbook, but I realized that wasn't going to hit enough. Not that it wasn't going to hit enough people, but just having it between 2 pages, I could do a lot more with multimedia and things like that. So we're working on that instead. The thing about me as a writer is I don't want to just write the next book because I need a book. I really want the right idea, and nothing from a nonfiction point of view has hit me. Like, I was obsessed with the hype stuff. So I'm looking for that nonfiction idea I'm obsessed with. I will tell you this, and this is, I don't know if this fits for a business podcast, but I'm doing something that I've wanted to do my whole life and have played with my whole life, but I'm early mornings working on a novel, and I'm taking it very seriously. And that's not to compete with the business. I'll never stop doing that. But I've been writing fiction my whole life, but it always felt like it needed to come second or third because, making a living, even at the stuff I love to do, had to come first. And I don't know, I just recently was like, why am I 46 and haven't completed a novel? I have some talent at it. Let's just do this thing. So I'm enjoying that as well.
Will the novel be a way to concretize your knowledge of hype, of what things you've already written about? Showing
no, the novel will have nothing to do with my business except, and if I were practicing what I preach, I wouldn't even be mentioning it on this show because it doesn't fit the brand through line, But we're talking about dreams and hopes. So there we go. I will say the only way that it ties to everything else I'm doing, well, I'll tell you 2 things. If we have an extra 5 minutes, I'll tell you 2 things about it. So one thing was, it did come from a bit of research in the novel. So I read something about a certain secret society that didn't fit in the novel, but it was in a book that I drew on a lot. And it was just so fascinating to me that I had to keep at it. And not even a secret society. It's this group called the Rosicrucians, who was possibly a prank in the 1700s, but that like drove a lot of world history. So I was like, oh, this is a great story outside of everything else. And then the other thing I'll say is I'm a big believer in the idea of taking bets. We talked about poker before. I don't think you ever know what that thing is that's going to that you can sink your teeth into. We all have these plans, but the world is pretty random. And I don't think that's a bad thing. We try to strategize everything, but I don't know, for example, this Finding Oz book was really interesting to me because he would constantly be rational. He would say, well, I'm really into, giving people joy. So I'll start a retail store. And then in the retail store, kids would gather around and he would tell them these amazing stories. And his mother-in-law, who was actually a big suffragette, like a famous suffragette, would say, why don't you write these down? These are amazing. You used to be a writer. And he'd be like, nah, no one's going to pay for that. I got to really keep my eye on the prize. I got to focus on the business. And the business did fine, but it didn't do great. And then when he finally took his eye off the prize and had fun doing this thing, he became a multi-gazillionaire and changed the culture. So I think it's really important to constantly be placing bets that are based on your interests, that are outside of what you do for a living. And I don't mean a side hustle. I don't mean being a crypto person, unless you're fascinated with that. I mean, really just following your interest and doing little things and then seeing if do people respond to it? Can you take another step? Can you take another step? So I don't know. I kind of live my life that way and always have. And yeah.
Yeah. I've always said strategy is not a linear road. It's a general highway. And you can shift lanes, but as long as you go to a general direction, you'll find different things along the path.
I think that's right.
Michael F. Schein, this has been a fantastic and inspirational. I mean, I'm like, I gotta get this damn book done now. I'm like, God, this is really exciting. Thank you so much.
That chaos idea sounds great. I'd love to see it when you have something to show.
Yeah. We're gonna. By the way, I'm gonna talk audience. I gotta talk to Michael F. Schein about micro media fame.
Micro fame media.
Micro fame media. So again, thank you so much for the audience. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. I mean, what I always tell people, I mean, if you have show notes, you can put the company, microfamemedia.com, all that. But I guess the main things are, the best way to find out about me and my ideas is just go to wherever books are sold, Amazon or your store, the Hype Handbook. That's one thing. And if you're interested in books, there's a site, hypereads.com. hypereads.com. That's where I give, weekly book recommendations, and they're kind of unusual books like the Finding Oz stuff and all of that. So that's another thing that is a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm going to check that out. I had no clue. Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah.
Well, Michael F. Schein, thank you so much for partaking in this discussion. Again, congratulations! A really good book, a great book, a fun read, and a very easy read. So thank you so much.
This was a blast, Kevin. I really enjoyed every moment of this.
Good. All right, there you go, audience. Make sure to check the show notes. Get this book. I'm telling you, you're going to like it. And boy, we got some great tips for your personal life, for your company. Do it. So with that, I will see you guys later. If you like this content and want to hear other things like it, head on over to the website at blackmarketleadership.com. That's blackmarketleadership.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, and you can even create a free members profile